Are you tired of struggling to understand the themes and characters in classic works of literature? Well, I've got you covered. Welcome to Read It and Don't Weep, the podcast that will help you breeze through your high school literature classes. I am your host, Jackie Taggart, and I have taught high school English for almost 20 years. Join me each episode as I dive into the world of classic literature and break down the essential elements of each work. From Shakespeare to Steinbeck, I'll cover it all. My goal is to give you valuable insight and analysis on some of the most popular high school literary texts, as well as tips and tricks for acing your tests and essays. Let's start reading. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Read It and Don't Weep. In this episode, we are starting a new literary classic that has tortured students for ages. The Tragedy of Romeo and Juliet by the one, the only, William Shakespeare. This play really is a rite of passage in literature classes. So let's get started reading. If you do not have a copy of the play, I would highly recommend using the My Shakespeare website. It's awesome. The resource contains full text for 6 Shakespeare plays, including Romeo and Juliet. In addition to the full text, the My Shakespeare website includes videos, interactive content, and lots of tools to enrich your reading of the play. You can set up a free account on their website, which I have linked in the show notes. I have used this resource in several classes for different plays, and it is the best. Even if you are using a school-issued book, the My Shakespeare website can help you better understand the text. Before we begin our reading, I would like to start by discussing the structure of Shakespeare's plays. I'm not going to get into the language and poetic structure. Hopefully your teacher is providing instruction on the iambic pentameter in the play. If not, there are lots of great resources on YouTube where you can learn all about iambic pentameter. The only one I will mention specifically is my favorite TED Talk given by Akala of the Hip-Hop Shakespeare company called Hip-Hop and Shakespeare. It is linked in the show notes if you want to watch it. I've used it with my students as an introduction to several Shakespeare plays, as it made Shakespeare's language more relatable to students who enjoy hip-hop music, as hip-hop has the same poetic structure as Shakespeare's poetry. So, if you are struggling to understand Shakespeare but enjoy hip-hop music, watch this TED Talk and learn the similarities between the two. What I am going to discuss now is the structure of a Shakespearean play. All of Shakespeare's plays have 5 acts. Now, there may be different number of scenes within these acts, but every play is limited to 5 acts, and there's a reason for this. The 5 acts in Shakespeare's plays follow the 5 parts of a plot: exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. So Act 1 in any Shakespearean play will provide the audience with the exposition. The characters and the setting are introduced in Act 1, and there will also be an inciting incident or complication that will set the action of the play in motion. In Act 2, complications occur that frustrate the protagonist's efforts to achieve his goal. In Romeo and Juliet, we have 2 protagonists, so there will be multiple complications that frustrate our 2 young lovers. In Act 3, the complications continue to unfold until the protagonist, or in our play, protagonists, have a reversal of fortune. In a tragedy, the protagonist's good fortune will turn unlucky. The climax of the play will occur at some point in Act 3. Shakespeare has placed the climax in different parts of Act 3 depending on the play, but it always occurs in Act 3. Now, if we are attending the theater, the intermission would occur at the end of Act 3, and everyone would get up and go to the restrooms or grab a snack and get ready for the second half of the play. In Act 4, the results of the protagonist's reversal of fortune plays out. This may include a confrontation between the protagonist and antagonist, which puts the final outcome in doubt. Finally, in Act 5, the complication is resolved and loose plot ends are tied up. Shakespeare didn't write sequels, so there will be no doubts left to the audience's imagination. So that's the structure of a Shakespearean play. This structure applies to Shakespeare's comedies as well as his tragedies. Hey teachers! Hunting for some top-notch resources to go along with this podcast episode? You'll find them right in my store. A quick click on the link in the show notes gets you right there. What awaits? A stash of guided notes, note-taking aids, and assessments to use with your students. Go ahead, make the most of these resources today. Now, on to our play. We are kicking things off with the prologue. The prologue is right before the actual play starts, kind of like a preview of the play we are about to read. First, let's chat about who is doing the talking in the prologue. It's a group called the chorus, but no, they're not going to sing, and it's not a musical. In Greek tragedies and Shakespearean literature, the chorus can be just one person or a bunch of people giving the audience the lowdown on what's going on. Think of the chorus as the narrator, but since this is a play, we won't hear from the narrator frequently. So what's the deal with the prologue anyway? Why is it there? Well, it's like a movie trailer. It gets the audience excited about the story and gives us some insider information about what's going to happen and the mood of the play. Actually, spoiler alert, unlike a movie trailer, the prologue gives the audience a summary of the whole play, including the ending. The prologue also sets the tone and the mood of the play. Quick poetry lesson. The prologue is a sonnet, and a sonnet is a 14-line poem written in iambic pentameter, which is a form of poetry. A sonnet is made up of 3 quatrains. A quatrain is 4 lines of poetry where every other line rhymes. These 3 quatrains are followed by a couplet, which is 2 lines of poetry that rhyme. That's how we get to a total of 14 lines. So if you are following along either in your book or on the My Shakespeare website, you will want to open to the prologue and take a look at the first quatrain or the first 4 lines of the prologue. To households both alike in dignity, in fair Verona where we lay our scene, from ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. First, let's look at the rhyme scheme. The first and third lines rhyme. Dignity and mutiny, as do the second and fourth lines, seen and unclean. But what does it mean? Well, 2 families in Verona of equal social status have recently started fighting with each other. There will be bloodshed on both sides of this feud. That's the first quatrain. Quatrain number 2 talks about the next idea. From forth the fatal loins of these 2 foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose misadventured pietas overthrows doth with their death bury their parents' strife. Notice the same rhyme scheme as the first quatrain. What does it mean? Two children, one from each family, will fall in love, take their own lives, and end their families' feuding. If you are taking notes, flag the line, "A pair of star-crossed lovers take their life." We will come back to this in a few minutes. On to quatrain number 3. The fearful passage of their death-marked love, and the continuance of their parents' rage, which but their children's end not could remove, is now the 2 hours' traffic of our stage. The story of their love and their parents' rage is the topic of this 2-hour play. Note the rhyme scheme is consistent with the previous 2 quatrains. Lastly, the final couplet, the which, if you with patient ears attend, what here shall miss, our toil shall strive to mend. If you listen closely, we will do our best to explain everything. Before moving on, look back at the rhyme scheme throughout the sonnet. If you are asked to explain the rhyme scheme of a sonnet, it is A-B, A-B, C-D, C-D, E-F, E-F, G-G. The first and third lines of each quatrain rhyme. In the first quatrain, we note this with the letter A. The second and fourth lines rhyme, so we note this with the letter B. That's how we get A-B, A-B. The same pattern repeats in the next 2 quatrains, indicated with the letters C-D, C-D, and then E-F, E-F. Finally, the sonnet ends with a couplet, or pair of rhyming lines indicated with the letters G-G. So the rhyme scheme of a sonnet is expressed as A-B, A-B, C-D, C-D, E-F, E-F, G-G. That is the structure and rhyme scheme of a sonnet. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me by email at readitanddontweep@gmail.com, or you can always reach out to your teacher for help. Before I end this episode, I want you to look back at the line I asked you to flag. A pair of star-crossed lovers take their life. Sounds heavy, right? Well, it is telling the audience that 2 children from these arguing families are going to fall head over heels in love. But things aren't going to end well. And that's where this term, star-crossed, comes into the play. It's like saying their love was doomed from the start, which is a kind of big deal in this story. Here's something to think about. Why does Shakespeare, the guy who wrote all this, give away the ending right at the start? Well, it's all about fate. This idea that some things are just meant to happen, whether we like it or not. By telling the audience the ending, we get to see how everything leads up to that ending. It's like we're watching it unfold in slow motion, even though we already know what's coming. To wrap up, let's talk about themes, those big ideas that come up again and again. First, we have fate. That's the star-crossed lovers part. Then there's love, and its opposite, violence. Big-time contrasts there. And of course, the idea of family loyalty, which is a huge deal in this story as well. Those are the 3 themes I'm going to focus on throughout our study of the play. And that's it, the prologue of Romeo and Juliet in a nutshell. Before finishing this episode, I want to encourage you to keep a reading journal as you read so you can make note of your thoughts as you read. I will provide prompts for you to respond. To start thinking, think about the following. People are different in many ways. Where they come from, what they believe in, how they look, or even their age. Sometimes the way we act around others can make us feel different too. Do you think our differences are what make us who we are? Or is it the things we share in common? In simpler terms, how do these differences impact our friendships and connections with each other? Take a few minutes to jot down your ideas in your reading journal so you can come back to them later. Stay tuned for my next episode where we'll dive into Act 1, Scenes 1 and 2. Thanks for listening to this episode of Read It and Don't Weep. Be sure to subscribe to the show so you will be notified when new episodes are released. If you liked today's show, please leave a review so others can discover my show. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes, drop me an email at readitanddontweep@gmail.com or reach out to me on social media. I would love to hear from you. The links are in the show notes. Happy reading!